In the neighborhood, everything seemed perfect. A traditional family, a quiet father, a devoted mother, well-mannered children, and a mansion that demanded respect. But behind the walls of Breeze Knoll, something dark was brewing in silence. Until one day, blood was spilled and the home became a tomb. There were no screams, no rush, only silence. A silence meticulously calculated by a man who believed he was fulfilling the will of God. For 18 years, no one knew where he was. No one even knew if he was still alive. Until a sculpture, just a simple sculpture, shown on a TV program, revealed what no one expected. The face of the killer, recreated in clay, was real, and he was living among ordinary people. Welcome to Urban Hauntings, where we dive into mysteries, paranormal events, and true crimes, always with a deep and immersive approach. If you enjoy this type of content, support the channel. Like the video, share your theories in the comments, send it to others who love the supernatural and true crime too, and subscribe with the bell turned on. Your support makes all the difference and helps us grow. Now let's dive into today's story. John Emil List was born in September 1925 in cold, quiet Michigan. He grew up in a household where the fear of doing wrong was greater than the desire to learn. His father was rigid and distant, rarely cracked a smile. His mother, Alma, was overprotective. She wouldn't let him mix with other children. The silence at home was only broken by prayers and commands, always with the Bible open on the table. Religion was the thread that stitched his upbringing together, but not a comforting faith. It was a harsh, judgmental, suffocating one. Hell was real, and he was reminded of it every single day. John couldn't play with the neighbors, couldn't laugh too loud, couldn't make choices. Everything was sin. Everything was judgment. Even food had rules. That environment shaped something inside him, not in an explosive way, but in a cold, quiet, calculated manner. While other kids dreamed of being astronauts, John just wanted approval, his parents' blessing, his family's pride. But that pride was unreachable. His father treated him like a burden. His mother smothered him with guilt. John grew up alone, even surrounded by voices. A childhood without warmth, without affection, without choices. And when he finally became a man, he carried the belief that the world was just an extension of his home, a place where appearance mattered more than truth, and where judgment was unavoidable. War became the perfect escape for someone who wanted to leave home without looking rebellious. John enlisted and served in the United States military during World War II. Years later, he returned to the front during the Korean War. The military life, with its strict rules and clear hierarchy, was exactly what he knew, and where he felt safe. There, no one questioned orders. There, silence meant respect, not isolation. After his military service, he earned a degree in business and accounting, not out of passion, but for stability. It was the kind of career that would please his mother. Soon he landed a job, put on a suit, and married Helen Taylor, a widow with whom he had 3 children. In photos, the family looked like they came straight out of a 1950s American commercial. Smiles, family dinners, a picture-perfect life. But behind that facade, tensions were growing. Helen struggled with mental health and addictions that John hid at all costs. The religious faith he had carried since childhood became increasingly rigid, almost oppressive. He believed his family should live by strict moral codes, even if that meant controlling every aspect of their daily lives. For him, it was a divine mission to keep order. John saw himself as the patriarch of a domestic temple, a preacher within his own home. But that temple was fragile, and when their finances started to collapse, faith became an excuse. The fear of scandal, of public humiliation, of shame before the church and society, all of it began to erode the man who once only wanted acceptance. And then, his mind started to rationalize the unthinkable. The Breeze Knoll mansion was imposing. Located in Westfield, New Jersey, it radiated tradition and respect. Tall windows, elegant columns, stained glass windows. Everything evoked the nobility of a bygone era. John bought it as a symbol of status. He wanted the world to see his family as blessed, successful, untouchable. The house was an altar of appearances. But behind the curtains, the home was falling apart. Not long after they moved in, John lost his job, and no one knew. Every morning he got dressed, grabbed his briefcase and left, as if going to work. but he spent his days wandering around train stations, reading the newspaper, avoiding eye contact. His fear of being seen as a failure was stronger than any impulse to ask for help. Unemployment became a secret, as heavy as a corpse. The bills kept piling up, the kids' tuition, the upkeep of the house, Helen's medications. Everything was falling apart, but he wouldn't admit it. In his mind, the downfall was temporary, and faith alone was enough to endure it. Deep down, he hoped for a miracle, but the miracle never came, and each new bill felt like a sentence. John kept praying, but now with anger, with fear, and with desperation. The mansion, once a symbol of success, became a prison, and the shame spread like a tumor. The Tiffany-stained glass window in the living room could have sold for $100,000, but he didn't know that. Or maybe he didn't want to know. He was blinded by his own rigidity. And when he realized that financial salvation would never come, he made a decision. He would save his family from what he called eternal disgrace, in his own twisted way, with blood. John didn't kill in a fit of rage. It wasn't hatred, it wasn't fury. It was planned, it was cold, and according to him, it was out of love. In his mind, distorted by a lifetime of rigid religious belief, those murders were an act of mercy. He truly believed he was sparing his family from humiliation, from poverty, from spiritual corruption. Better to die in grace than to live in sin. That was the mantra echoing in his head. On the morning of the murders, everything was carried out with chilling precision. He started with his wife, Helen, a single shot to the back of the head. Then he went upstairs to his mother's room and did the same. Next, he waited for the kids to return home from school. One by one, he led them into the ballroom and pulled the trigger with cold detachment. The silence inside the house was haunting. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the cheap perfume Helen always wore. The late afternoon shadows stretched across the floor like fingers reaching for the bodies. Instead of fleeing right away, John took his time preparing the scene. He lined the bodies up in the ballroom, put religious music on the record player, and left behind a confession letter addressed to his church pastor, explaining everything. He wrote it calmly, laid out his reasoning, said he had prayed for a long time before making the decision, and insisted that God would understand his intention, that this, in his eyes, was an act of deliverance. Before leaving the house, he turned off the lights, locked the door, and vanished. None of the neighbors suspected a thing in those first few days. The house remained quiet, windows shut tight like a mausoleum. The bodies weren't discovered until nearly a month later, when the smell of decomposition finally forced police to break in. At the center of it all, that stained glass window let in a soft beam of light, as if God himself was watching, in silence. By the time police found the bodies, John was long gone. And the most terrifying part? There were no leads, not a single solid clue. He had vanished like smoke. No credit cards, no digital trail. He changed his name, moved to a new town, started a new life. For 18 years, he was a ghost in the files of American criminal investigations, a fugitive who slipped right through the cracks. With a fake identity, he became Robert Peter Clark. He built a whole new backstory, got a job as an accountant, and even remarried. To his co-workers, he was quiet, polite, methodical. Nothing about him seemed off. There was no anger in his eyes, just routine, just silence. Meanwhile, the old mansion rotted away. The story faded, and one by one, the case files were quietly closed and shelved. The lack of recent photographs had been one of the biggest challenges in the investigation. Police only had old images of him, and they were no help at all. Until 1989, almost 2 decades after the murders, when forensic artist Frank Bender was given a unique task: to recreate the face of John Emil List using age progression techniques. With clay, patience, and a little intuition, Bender molded a face, and he nailed it. The sculpture was shown on the TV show America's Most Wanted, an investigative program focused on tracking down fugitives. And the image sparked something. It looked familiar. A woman in Virginia picked up the phone. She said her neighbor, Robert Clark, looked exactly like the sculpture. The anonymous tip hit the dormant case like a bolt of lightning. And just like that, the ghost began to take shape again. It was in early June of 1989 when investigators knocked on the door of Robert Peter Clark. The man answered calmly, as if he were expecting a mailman, not the FBI. When they asked about John Emil List, he denied everything, said he didn't know him, kept steady eye contact, spoke with a controlled voice. But the resemblance to the forensic sculpture was undeniable. The FBI arrested him, and little by little, the mask fell, not with screams, but with silence. John's arrest made headlines across the country. The Breeze Knoll killer, finally found, had been living a brand new life, next to a new wife, completely unaware of her husband's dark past. What shocked people the most was how naturally he had started over, as if he had never committed a crime, as if the lives of his children, his wife, and even his own mother weighed nothing on his conscience. During interrogations, John remained composed. No tears, no outbursts. He simply confirmed what investigators already suspected, said he did what had to be done, and reaffirmed his faith. He believed God understood him. Frank Bender's sculpture, combined with the neighbor's tip, became a key piece in the case. That face, molded in clay, had accomplished what years of searching couldn't. More than 22 million people watched the America's Most Wanted episode that led to his capture, a historic audience, and a reminder that even after so many years, the truth finds a way. In court, the name Robert Clark vanished. What remained was John Emil List, the father, the murderer, the fugitive, and now, the defendant facing justice in the United States. The trial began under intense media scrutiny and public curiosity. Everyone wanted to understand what drives a father to murder his entire family. The defense argued that John suffered from PTSD due to his years in the military. They claimed he'd suffered a complete emotional breakdown, but the jury wasn't convinced. There was too much planning, too much coldness, too much time to reconsider. John's letters were read aloud in court. They revealed a twisted logic. He spoke of redemption, of spiritual salvation, of sparing his children from the sins of the world. To him, the crime was a sacrifice, an offering, but the prosecution painted a different picture: selfishness, absolute control, sociopathy hidden beneath religious dogma, a man obsessed with public image, willing to erase anything that threatened his reputation. The judge was merciless. He said he had never seen a case so cold, so methodically planned. The sentence was clear: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Behind bars, John maintained his routine. He read the Bible, wrote letters, and refused interviews. He never showed visible remorse. Still claimed God knew his intentions, and that forgiveness would come after death. Outside the prison walls, the country remained divided. Some saw him as a monster, others as a man broken by social pressure and religious fanaticism. But for the children he murdered, the wife he left to die, and the mother he betrayed, there was no redemption, only silence. A silence John never tried to escape. Months after the murders, the Breeze Knoll mansion was destroyed in a fire. The cause was never fully determined. Some blamed vandals, others blamed an electrical fault. But to many, it felt as if the house had refused to continue existing, as if its walls, soaked in horror and silence, had begged for destruction. Nothing remained but ashes, of a home that once stood as a symbol of prestige. Among the wreckage, something irreplaceable was lost forever: a Tiffany-stained glass window valued at over $100,000. A rare piece, worth enough to settle most of the debts that drove John to collapse. He never knew its value, or he chose to ignore it. That one item, which could have saved his entire family, burned with the wood and the memories. It was a cruel reminder. The tragedy could have been avoided by a hair. The fire didn't just destroy the home, it erased clues, details, evidence. When curious onlookers visited the lot, they said the air felt heavier, like time had frozen on the day of the crime. No one ever rebuilt on that land. It remained an open scar, and people in the town preferred not to talk about it. Breeze Knoll became a legend, and like every legend, it carried a dark echo. John died in prison in 2008, at 82 years old. He never showed regret. He never asked for forgiveness. But his story still lives on, as a case study, as a warning, as a mystery that defies logic. Because how can a man who seems so ordinary plan something so monstrous and keep living as if nothing happened? The story of John Emil List isn't just about murder. It's about masks, about what hides behind the perfect image, about fanaticism disguised as faith, and about silence, the kind that screams louder than any confession. And you? Do you live near someone who seems just a little too perfect? If this story gave you chills, don't leave without subscribing. There's a lot more coming, and every new case might show us just how little we truly know about the darkness inside the human soul.